Hello there, welcome back. This is Mr. B again for the second part of my Romans lesson. We've just done the first part and I hope you enjoyed that a couple of days ago. All about the armour and the kit that the two different types of soldiers wore. If you remember, it was the legionari, the legionaries, and also the auxilia, the auxiliary soldiers. All about the kit they wore. We looked at the different armour, we looked at the different chainmail, of course. Still got my chainmail on here to show you. But now we're going to have a look at the kit bags, the sort of stuff they carried around with them, not just their armour, but the stuff they carried around to survive in everyday life. So here we are for part 2 of the Romans. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk a little bit about that timeline again. Now, briefly we mentioned it towards the end of the last episode, and if you remember, I wanted to make them less about the timelines nowadays. I'm still going to mention it in these recent ones, but more about the artifacts that the people use. So it's important to remember the dates, but I'm sure you're interested more in the artifacts here. So we're going to get into them in a second. But last time we left it in 122 AD, which was Hadrian's Wall. So we had, just a very, very quick recap, we had Julius Caesar invading 55 to 54 BC two times and he failed. Then we had Caligula, who was named after the boot, remember, if you've watched the first one, for kicking soldiers when he was younger. That was in 40 AD. And then we had 43 AD at Claudius. Now, when Claudius came, his soldiers had to bring stuff with him. He brought 40,000 men. They invaded Britain, invited in, would you believe it, by a man called King Verica of a tribe called the Atrebates, who was concerned that the other tribes were attacking him. So Britain was made of all these little tribes, like all teams who fought all the time. And if they'd have stuck together, they might have got rid of the Romans. But instead, they were fighting all the time. And he actually invited Claudius in. So when Claudius invaded, he was what we call unopposed, really. He came in for the first part. He did have people attacking him later, but for the first part, he was pretty much just walked in with his soldiers and nobody could do anything. But they didn't stand together because he was invited in by King Verica of the Atrebates. Now, as time went on, Britain became much more what we call naturalised. Now, what that means is where people in Britain started to accept the Roman rule and started to live like Romans. So when we had Boudicca with a red hair who got defeated by a man called Gaius Suetonius Paulinus on the other side of London, a battle called the Battle of Watling Street, when she got defeated in 61 AD, then that was a lot of the tribes gave up after that, and they still fought the Romans for the next 300 and odd years, but basically it was never as bad as that when Boudicca first attacked. At one point she had an army of 250,000 soldiers, just to give you an idea. So then it came up to Hadrian's Wall, 122 AD, to stop the people from the top of Britain, where Scotland is now, for getting to the bottom. And that was pretty much it, really. It just carried on like that, where they were fighting these battles, the Romans, and trying to sort of stop these tribes from attacking them. But the soldiers, as they were going around, like I said, guys, it's not all about the timeline, is it? It's about the equipment. We're carrying stuff like this. Now, most of these contents have come out of this bag here. And I'm just going to show you the bag. This is a bag that I made. And I made this out of some old leather. And this was actually off an old chair that I had. And I've made it a bit more what we call distressed, which is where you rub it with some sandpaper to make it look really, really old. Now, I didn't just make this up. This was copied from one that was a picture, actually a carved picture, on a very famous monument called Trajan's Column. Now, Emperor Trajan fought one of the last great battles of Rome when he fought people who were rebelling in their country against the Romans, and he had to take his army and fight them. And I'm going to put a picture of it up now, actually. He had this amazing, magnificent, gigantic column, like a cylinder, like a big sort of big tube of Pringles made out of stone, and he had a cartoon going on. I bet you only think cartoons are recent, don't you? But he had this cartoon of what happened going in a circle wrapped around it all. So if you walked around it, you would see the full story. And one of the pictures on it was soldiers carrying these. So this is a loculus, and it was on top of something called a furker. You would fasten it on, so it goes over the two sides of the pole there, and it goes on there in the middle on a nail, and you could carry all your kit around in this. So this was the days before backpacks were invented like modern soldiers, so you would carry it around in this. Now we can see that on the picture of Trajan's column of the soldiers that were carrying stuff there, so that's what I've copied it after. So there's nothing in the bag at the moment apart from a little bit of wool, but what I've done is I've put some things together that I think the Roman soldiers might have had. We've never found a full bag because they've rot away, you see, in the ground. But this gives you a general idea of the sort of things the soldiers had, such as food. So here we go. So here's a net bag that I made, and just like my Stone Age tools, by the time I'd made this net bag and tied all the little pieces, all the little knots together, I had to do it on a frame made out of nails. All my hands were sort of red raw. It was a little bit like I'd been doing the flint, making some flint tools. I've actually been making some flint tools this week. You can see the cuts on my hands because it is quite tricky to do. But yeah, so it was really tough on the fingers. And I made this bag here to carry this Roman bread in. Now this Roman bread is basically salt dough. So if you've never made this, and you might be able to make this at home actually, it's basically, you can get recipes on the internet for salt dough, but basically it's just salt, flour and water. And it goes really, really hard, and you can make little models out of it. It's like modelling clay. You can put it in the oven, you can make badges and stuff like that. Maybe that's something you could do as a follow-up to this activity actually, to this video. So there you go. So this is some Roman bread. Now I've had this Roman bread now for 6 years, and it's not gone bad in all of that time. It still looks exactly the same. It's not gone green or anything like that. It's rock hard. I don't think I'd bite it now and eat it, but it gives you an idea of the sort of stuff that the Roman soldiers used to eat. Now here's the interesting thing. Even soldiers nowadays have this bread. It's just like biscuits. They just call it biscuits. They had it in the First World War as well. And my First World War video will be coming soon where you can have a look at some of that. It's called hard tack in the First World War. And basically a hard biscuit like this or a hard bread like this was a great way for soldiers to carry around some carbohydrates that give you lots of energy for carrying all your kit around. Now, he's not got much, has he, this soldier? He's basically just got that. And that's because, and this gives us some really interesting insights into how the Romans worked, he would have only been a part of a group of 8 soldiers called, this is a tricky word, I'll put this on the screen for you, see if you can say this, a contubernium. Contubernium. If you want to have a go at that, if you wanted to pause that, parents, you can. See if you can say it one more time. Contubernium. Now, a contubernium was a group of 8 people, and again, I'll put some maths on the screen here for you now. 10 contuberniums, that 10 groups of 8 people, would make something called a century, which is a bit odd because normally that means 100 in our modern language. So 480 would be a cohort. You would have 10 cohorts, which would make up a legion. And a legion would be 4,800, or by the time you've got other people added on, about 5,000 people. So a legion was 5,000. But it's all built up from this group of 8 people. So I might have the bread, my friend might have some meat, somebody else might have some oil to cook it in. And the idea is that you stay together as a little group. Even when you camp at night, you all carry a piece of leather, about a little bit bigger than the size of this table here, this cloth on here. And then it would have holes all up the side, a little bit like the holes I've put in here, and then you would lay it on the ground, and your 8 pieces of leather would be sewn together just by hand with a piece of lace, leather lace, and then you can make a big tent. You put some poles up in the corner, your furkers, those sticks, and you can make yourself a tent. So it's all about sticking together. You also fought with them as well. So your mate Fred, he wouldn't have been really called Fred, would he? But your mate Fred might be in the army all the way from the start with you, and you basically would be used to fighting exactly alongside him, so you would get to know him. Now, of course, he wasn't called Fred. We can have a little bit of fun with the names as well. And I've got a very easy system to do this. If you are a boy, you can add the suffix at the end, which is a bit you stick on the end of a word. You can add ius, I-O-U-S, or onius, and both of those together will give you a choice of a different name. So if your name, my real name is Darren, okay, so I would be Darenius or Darrenonius, so you could choose that. Or if you was If your name was George, you could be Georgius or Georgionius. So that's if you're a boy, okay? So again, if you want to pause and have a think of your name, you can do. And if you're a girl, you can put a on the end or ika on the end. So it doesn't quite work if you've got an a on the end already. If you're called Emma, you can't be called Emma, so you could be called Emika. Or if you're called Jodie, you could be called Jodia or Jodika. You get the idea? So for a girl, it's a or ika. So again, if you want to pause and do that, you can do, okay? So that's Roman names. But let's get back to what a Roman soldier would be carrying. So cleanliness was very important to the Roman soldier, but not in the way you realise nowadays. We're very clean now, of course, all washing our hands at the moment. This is for a Roman soldier to clean himself in a steam room. So he would go in a steam room till all his sweat was coming out and all the dirt from working on the wall and patrolling and stuff like this. And then he would scrape all the dirt off like this and flick it at a slave, maybe like that. So that's called a strigil, for scraping off all the dirt. We've also got this as well. Some people might know this already if you know your horrible histories. I'm just going to hold it there. It's a sponge on a stick, and that's what we call it. There's no Roman name for this one, no Latin name. But if you want to pause it and have a think about it, something to do with cleanliness, about what you could use this for, then you can do. And again, I'm going to give you the 5-second countdown now. Are you ready? It's a bit gross, that's all I'm going to say. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's for wiping your bottom. So I don't know if you got that right. This isn't a real one, it's just a replica. But some soldiers carried their own, or if not, don't worry, because you could use the public one. You go to a public toilet, use one that was in a bucket of vinegar. I don't even want to go there, it's just gross. Got a couple of other things as well. This is a wax tablet, but yeah, you can scratch a message on here and you can pass it on to somebody, normally the generals and people like that were using this. But for anybody, almost anybody, you could get this. So you can see it's not as posh as this one here. Little piece of lead here. Now lead is a metal that you can scratch on really easy. And what you could do is you could scratch a message on here and you could give that to somebody in the temple. You would fold it up like this. And they thought it was a message to go to the gods. Now, I haven't got time in a 15-minute video to talk all about the gods, but maybe that's something you could look up. I'll tell you what, at the end, I'll put that down as a little added task that you can do to look up some of the names of the Roman gods. One of the big ones in England was called Mithras, so I'll let you look that up. So they thought when you wrote on this, it was almost like sending a message or a text to a god, you know. So I don't know if they came true. And that brings us to the next bit. Now, this isn't about Roman soldiers. And I say this when I go in schools. All my workshops, really the Roman ones, are all about the soldiers. There's not much about the women, because the women in Roman times weren't allowed to do a lot of things. And I know that's not right, girls, but it's just the way it was in those days. So they expected women to, if you was a slave girl, you'd be doing jobs and cleaning and things like this. Or if you was a rich Roman wife, you would be expected to look after the house. But if you was a Roman slave girl, you might have one of these. Now, this is a way to make wool. Before spinning machines were made, you basically get some lamb's wool like this. You wrap it round there. Let's see if I can get it right first time. And then you would spin it. There you go. And that's how you make wool. And this is called a drop spinner. And it does actually go quite strong. You can make it quite strong, much stronger than that there. So just imagine, girls, you might have been doing that for about 12, 14 hours a day. Not very good at all. And the last two things we've got is just these. This is a bottle that holds, it doesn't look like it, but it holds nearly a full litre of water. So maybe you could do that. Maybe you could get a jug at home and see how much a litre is. It's quite a lot, that. This is just a copy of one found in Germany. And finally, this is a skillet. This is just a pan for cooking things on. And these didn't change all the way up from Roman times, all the way up to medieval times. They were still using them. In fact, all the way up to sort of the 1600s, they were still using things like this. There's a little introduction to the kit that the Romans had to put together for our two-part Roman series. These are only 15 minutes, of course. You can do a lot more reading if you like and find out a lot more about it. So thank you for watching. You've been watching 2 lessons all about Roman Britain, and I hope to see you again sometime.